I'm sure it's every leader's dream to have a team that proactively innovates and are really creative, and they bring creativity in their problem solving. Now, there's lots of literature and ideas out there on how to improve creativity and how to create an environment of innovation. Things such as creating psychological safety and really caring for your people and not putting too much pressure on them and things like that. But I'm sure you're all aware of those stuff. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of people doing great work on that. Now, what I want to do here is give you two techniques that you could use to improve innovation or create an environment for innovation and utilize foster creativity when solving specific problems. Now, innovation, it's a very interesting thing. Innovation happens when people are allowed to think creatively and take a step back and think strategically. So I'm going to tell you a story which is going to show how other companies have done it. Back in, I think, 80s or 90s, Hewlett Packard, HP, did some research, internal research, to identify various networks of people in their organization, not the formal hierarchical reporting lines, but networks of various people from different parts of the organization, and how did these networks contributed to innovation in the company. And surprisingly, they found there is a single network of around 35 women in a specific location, in a specific office, that contributed to something, like they created like something like a third of all their significant product innovation ideas. Just in a company of tens of thousands of people, global company, 35 women specifically in a specific location contributed so many ideas. So they got curious, and this is back in the days, maybe there weren't too many women engineers in the offices, so it was disproportional as well. And they were wondering, like, how come this group? So they brought them in for interviewing. And then someone realized, oh, this is the quilting group. So these are the group of people who get together once a week, lunchtime or something, and they quilt together. And they started asking them, well, what do you do in those quilting groups? How come you come up with so many innovative ideas? And they said, well, talk. I said, what are you talking about in there? So we talk about our families, our lives, we talk about work, we just talk. And that's the power of innovation. When you have people, when you give people the freedom to do something they like and to talk and to get to know each other, sometimes magically, a lot of times magically, innovation comes out of it. Now you see companies like Bose, the audio equipment producer, manufacturer. The CEO had a rule that no one is allowed to have coffee at their desk, because he wanted people to, when they're having coffee, they talk with each other and socialize, because that socialization aspect is what drives innovative thinking. Now, it's a difficult challenge, in the current times, most people work from home. There's less of that in-person interactions between people. But again, a leader needs to ask themselves, how can we create an environment where people can get together for the sake of getting together, for the sake of having a good time, and for the sake of enjoying and getting to know each other? Because it's guaranteed, once people get together, they're going to start talking about work, they're going to start talking about projects, they're going to bounce ideas off each other, and then you're going to have innovation. Now, creativity, well, goes hand in hand with innovation. But then, let's say you have a specific problem that you want to solve, and you want to get creative ideas for this problem. You want your teams to think outside the box and come up with creative ideas. You might have heard about something called an ideation session or ideation workshop. Well, that's a great way to get creative ideas out of people. But then there are a few rules with ideation workshops that people usually don't follow. Now, the number one rule of ideation workshop is no idea is wrong. No one is allowed to criticize anyone else's ideas. So people get together, put their ideas on sticky notes, put them on the wall, and that's it. No one can criticize them. Even if they come up with crazy ideas like using magic or wormholes or time travel, that's still okay, we put it on the wall. Then later we could go about refining them. Now the only thing that people are allowed to say or comment on each other's ideas is constructive ideas. If you think it's not going to work, you're only allowed to say how to make it work. Now another funny story about this, and this is from Ross Akoff again, the systems thinker, and he talks about this office in New York City, back in I think 60s. And this office had a problem with their elevators. It was just taking too long and people were waiting too long, and they got some consultants in to identify the problem, and consultants charged them X million dollars, did some research and said, yeah, well, people are waiting, I don't know, up to 2 minutes in the lobby. They're only allowed to wait, according to the standards, 30 seconds. So yep, it's boring, they're right to say we want this improved. And then they asked the consultant, well, how can we fix it? Consultant charged him again X million dollars, and then did some research and came back and said, well, you have a few options, but none of them are going to work for you. Well, you could open up new elevators, but that's going to reduce the real estate available, so you're not going to make the rental money that you're making from this office building, so it's not financially justified. You could invest in getting automated elevators, with computerized systems that identifies the optimal and efficient route of which floor they go first to pick up people and things like that. Again, it's not going to get you up to the 30-second standard. And a few other options, but none of them were viable for them. So they got no choice. They said, what should we do? Well, it's a function of the age of the building. We're going to tear the building down. There is no option available. Then these guys were really desperate. So they invited their entire team, not just the leader. They even invited more junior people in the room to come up with creative ideas. They did an ideation session. And well, there was this very young guy who was very quiet, and they asked him, how come you don't have any ideas? He said, well, I have an idea, but I'm sure if I say it, you're going to say it's not going to work. So I don't want to look stupid in front of everyone. And they said, oh, we promise, we're not going to say anything about this. And then he said, well, the problem is not the length that people are waiting there. The problem is people are bored because they're waiting for 2 minutes. So if you can find a way to entertain them for the 2 minutes that they're there, they're not going to mind waiting 2 minutes for the elevator. So then they came up with some ideas of putting in some mirrors or various other things in the elevator lobby so that people don't get bored when they're waiting for elevators. The lesson is, when we want to encourage creativity, we shouldn't shut people down, and we shouldn't tell people, oh, it's not going to work. We should only comment on how to make it work.